All right. Welcome back to another episode of How to Make Money with Hard Money. And today's another special episode as we are joined by our good friend, corporate leader, team member. The list goes on and on. But Rob Faw, thanks for joining us
Happy
today.
to be here. Thank you.
Very excited.
Man.
So this is, I think you're actually our first guest that has repeated for a second episode.
Well, if I'm honored.
Always pioneering.
Yeah, there you go.
So today we wanted to talk about, pivoting in tough markets, but I'm sure we're going to end all across the board here and have a lot of different topics to discuss. And there's some exciting new developments that you're working on as well that we can't wait to share. So yeah, I guess, maybe you could just give a highlight about who you are again for those who didn't maybe see the first episode.
Yeah. So Rob Faw, and I have been working with DKC for coming up on 4 or 5 years, and I think I've worked with you guys for 6 or 7 years, 7 or 8 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so and so my background, I grew up in Washington D.C., came down as a junior in high school, played a couple years of college basketball, married my high school sweetheart. I'm an Air Force veteran. I have traveled all over the world. I've got kind of a tech background, ran a number of technology companies. I've lived and worked in over 50, traveled into 50 countries, which is interesting.
Wow.
I've got 4 million miles of air travel, which is like being an alcoholic. You're drinking too much. And so I'm still recovering from that. But so I'm an entrepreneur. I love building and growing and developing things, and maybe have started probably close to a dozen different businesses.
Mhm.
And so I just love creating. And so we'll talk, as you mentioned a little bit later, some new things that I and we are working on together. And so I'm trying to think what maybe I've left out. Oh, so
A couple educational and
Yeah.
athletic endeavors.
I was talking to someone the other day. They said, actually the class that you both speak at, the entrepreneur leadership over at local high school.
Yep.
And they were saying, well, Mr. Faw, tell us about your background, your education. I said, well, I went to 2 years on campus, but then after that, it's like 7 years after work. And so, so anyway, I'm in a PhD program in my dissertation, and I'm actually in the 3rd semester starting in January, where I'll do the field study, and then I'll defend the dissertation in the summer, assuming that I stay on track, which is my intention to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and as you both know, I'm an early guy in the morning, so I get up, pretty early, 3 o'clock in the morning. I get my run in, and then I get after it with my schoolwork and all the different business interests I have.
I love it. That is a great introduction. I guess, is this marathon number 73 coming up?
Number 71. So,
71?
but now that you said 73, I just set a new goal for myself. That's terrible.
Now you have to do it.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, 71 coming up. And so it has a certain amount of meaning with a number of different things that I'm working on right now. But yeah, so I'm debating on whether to do my next long run tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
So I've been building it up. I did an 18, 19, and 20. So I'm going to start, I'm going to do at least a 16, but I'm thinking to myself, why not do another 18? It's an extra 30 minutes.
Oh, just another 18.
That's right. So I'm going to try to get that in. And then Jill and I have got an anniversary trip coming up. And so anyway,
That's exciting.
So getting after it.
Awesome. Well, I think also you've launched one of your books or a relaunch. I don't know how you describe it since the last podcast we've had, World's Best Value.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that book was about.
Yeah. So
in the notes and everything.
In 2000, I wrote a book called World's Best Value, Global Competition in the Information Age. And that was off the back of some of my technology interests at the time. And I kind of rewrote that entire framework. And I think earlier this year, we're in 2024, right?
Yeah.
So earlier this year, we launched a new book called World Class Value, Exponential Leadership or Leadership Excellence in the Exponential Age.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the book, right? So what's the title? But anyway, Leadership Excellence in the Exponential Age. And so, yeah, it's got a little bit of vintage to it, but primarily modern time kind of examples. And it's about building world-class organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that's right on brand with our podcast today, pivoting in a tough market. Obviously you've been a tremendous help to us as we've been pivoting in a tough market, but a lot of our listeners here are, entrepreneurs and business owners in the real estate game. And as we've discussed on recent podcasts, I guess we can start with like defining what is a tough market.
Yeah.
Why don't you take the lead on this one?
Yeah. So, a tough market, because we're real estate based. So I would say for real estate investors is when, conditions are tough, and conditions for real estate would be high interest rates, high property prices, tough lending criteria, lack of funding, lack of supplies of in construction.
Yep.
Those would be the items that I would say would constitute a tough market for us in general.
Anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah,
that you've
it's
seen?
interesting. So I've had an opportunity to live and work through a number of tough markets, and we all have a more or less a background back in 2008 during the mortgage crisis, and
It's okay. You can leave me out of that.
you're a bouncing baby on your mother's knee. But yeah, and then prior to that, the tech crunch back around 2000, and then you had 9/11, and they had an impact on real estate and markets. And so the only thing I would add to it is technology has a way of kind of normalizing some of these difficult markets, because a tough market also is characterized by complexity.
Yeah.
And so when we have complexity, we're trying to figure out all the moving parts,
Mhm.
and often can be the case. Technology helps us normalize some of those moving parts, and it helps us to figure out, okay, here's what I should do and here's what I shouldn't do, kind of a thing. But yeah, complexity, I would add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go
And like you always tell us, is really it's the mentality, right? Is it really a tough market? It's all how we view it and our perspective of it.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be an answer and a solution to any market. It's just a matter if we look at it as a huge mountain or we look at it as a molehill, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the topics we've been discussing internally is like adaptability,
Yeah.
being adaptable in tough markets. I mean, specifically, you mentioned a couple of the tough markets that you've been through. And Caleb and I have heard the stories, but I mean, you've had businesses in like the tech crunch, and you were a tech business in the tech crunch.
Right.
And so how does adaptability, how can that contribute to overcoming tough markets or thriving in them?
Well, you mentioned mindset earlier, and it does begin with the mindset, and then also what I call stepping back and zooming out.
Okay.
So what's actually going on, right? Now, sometimes there are things outside of our control, and you can get crushed in a tough market, and that's not a reflection on any of our capabilities. I mean, think about all the businesses that were crushed during COVID as an example. That was a
absolutely.
tough market.
Yeah.
And, many businesses are kind of, evolving through that. I was running a tech company when we went through the tech crunch, and it was the internet bubble, the
Sure.
tech bubble. And we had, I don't know, $1.5 million of capital coming in from one of our partners. And all of a sudden, within a month, that stopped. And so all of a sudden, it's like ring around the rosy, and then who's left without a chair?
Right.
And so sometimes the truth is, as entrepreneurs, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. And it's really about how do you frame that?
Mhm.
So it's not like we're always going to win when we're adapting. But I really like the point you're making about adapting in a tough market. In fact, as it turns out, my dissertation is on adapting leadership styles in changing environments. And so we're kind of going through a changing environment now. It seems quite relevant.
Yeah.
So one of the
absolutely.
things, I mean, you're talking about adapting. So how would you coach people to apply theory to action?
Yeah.
A lot of the times, I know myself too, because I'm learning a lot of these things is, we're reading books, we're getting strategies, we're getting all this information thrown at us 100 miles an hour off the internet and whatever, how we're, taking it in is, how do you actually apply it and execute?
For me, I love conceptual frameworks. And so the idea of creating a framework which kind of buttons down some of the variables, some of the key constructs, if you will,
Mhm.
and then perhaps some one or more theories that inform those constructs. So if I have a conceptual framework, now I've got a mental model.
Yeah.
So if I have the mental model, I don't actually have to be thinking a lot more about that. Now I'm kind of adapting with what's going on real time, right,
Yeah, working to
in
execute.
practice.
Yeah.
So I'd say part of the deal of adapting in tough markets is really just what's your framework? What can I control? What are the 2 or 3 or 5 variables that are actually informing? And you mentioned a few of them earlier, Caleb. The interest rates and a number of other things, market price or housing prices, supply, and so on and so forth.
Construction.
So having that framework actually now allows, say, what do I do more of and what do I do less of, and just making those adaptations.
Yeah. So, and that's a great point that we're both making. I would say even like to direct it towards hard money lending
Yeah.
for a moment too.
Mhm.
Real estate investors and how can hard money lending or hard money loans, private equity loans, how can they help real estate investors in today's market overcome
Yeah. So
or adapt?
yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for hard money lending and where we fit the most is funding is restrictive right now, and it has been. Qualifications, your tax returns, your finances all have to be buttoned up from A to Z to qualify for many,
Even
many loans.
experience, liquidity.
Experience. You're a new time, you're a first time investor. It gets tough in a market when you don't have all the qualifications for banking. And then also you're dealing with distressed real estate, which doesn't qualify and fit under banking regulations anyway.
Yeah.
So for hard money or private funding, lax funding criteria. That's been our place, and quick funding.
Yeah.
You got to capitalize
I
deals.
was, yeah,
Speed is sound.
speed is an important point too, because, qualifications is certainly a big aspect, but there's a lot of our borrowers are very qualified and
Yeah.
have tons of experience, liquidity, great credit, and things like that as well. And so there's still a place for hard money loans for those borrowers. Also, speed of funding can play a big role in that. I would even add, like, when there's uncertain markets, right now it's like, what are prices worth? I mean, we last time with James Constable, we talked about the beach market's a great example of
Yeah.
uncertainty. What are things worth right now?
Mhm.
Also being like locking in long-term debt. If interest rates are high, you face prepayment penalties and things like that. So having bridge loans, 1 year bridge loans that have flexible criteria that you can secure
Yeah.
while waiting for a more certain market, which I think there's signs that a more certain market is coming our way.
Yeah, I mean, real estate's cyclical. We always have spans where everyone says, "Oh, it's 10-year runs," or however they might be. So the truth is, it's semi-predictable.
Yeah.
So you can have maybe a 5-year plan versus a 30-year plan, and it could still work quite well for you.
Yeah.
So it's important.
And I think the cycles in real estate and the uncertainties that you both were mentioning. So hard money lending is a great bridge between more uncertain environments to more certain environments, right?
Mhm.
And so it just plays a vital role in terms of real estate investment, in terms of, because of the speed,
Yep.
because of the use of the capital,
Yep.
because I'm bridging to more certain financing, right? Once I have a stable asset, right, that's
Right.
been modernized, if you will, and upgraded, and it's
Yeah.
either going to be, flipped or leased or refinanced or whatever it may be. It's a great bridging product. It fills a really important gap in the financing
Yeah.
marketplace.
It's a great point. And even in, the more certain and uncertain market, we've seen the hard money loan product, thrive in both environments too. I mean, we've talked about it
Yeah.
on previous episodes, but, in 21, 22, we were seeing a lot of fix and flip.
Right.
Speed of closing was really important to be able to capitalize on opportunities and beat out other investors to quick closes.
Yeah.
And then, we've seen a complete shift towards more refinance style loans. And right now we're seeing new construction really come through. And so new construction loan products, that's not just us, that's national. Even at the MPLA, they were talking about that. There's a lot of private equity, a lot of debt
Yeah.
moving towards new construction. So
Yep.
I think, we've just seen more so a shift in loan products.
Yeah.
Um,
And in devastation too, like you were saying just before, is hurricanes. Think about that. None of these hurricane homes are financeable by bank lending. It's just not available to them.
Mm.
And these people are looking for FEMA money, insurance money, which is delayed because of all the claims. So what do people do? Where do they turn when they have no other option? Well, private financing and hard money lending has been a huge pivotal turnaround to help these people in a time of need.
yeah.
I mean, just reinforcing it's an affordable bridge. I mean, if we think about it, real estate is always moving from one place to a next.
Okay.
And we're just describing that. And so the ability to bridge in and out, depending on, is a wonderful tool and a resource for real estate investors.
Absolutely. And I know you were speaking at one of our events recently with Elite Networking and Elite Cash Buyers as our partner. You were talking about leadership qualities, leadership qualities in tough markets or when you're pivoting in tough markets. How would you describe what are some fundamental leadership styles or skill sets that you think that our borrowers, real estate investors should focus on?
Well, so I'll start by saying in my research, right, I have learned that there are over 60 leadership styles, which is like, what? And so and if I asked anybody, myself included, what's your leadership style? I might say one or two things, but I won't know the other 58, right?
Right.
And so of all the leadership styles
great
in
point.
this environment, an adaptive leadership style is really going to serve people quite well,
Mhm.
because what it allows us to do is to pivot. We talked about that, and deal with uncertainty, deal with competition,
Mhm.
deal with change. Technology influences everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So what effect is it having on the marketplace, and how is that affecting our business and anybody else's business?
Mm.
So I think adaptive leadership is crucial. And I think it's one of the most, perhaps not fully well understood leadership styles. Many of us might connect with almost servant leader or someone that a transformative leader. I said that's okay,
Yeah.
and they have and that both of those have their place. But in the environment that we live in, especially when you've got a lot of competition, you've got changing environments, and you've got interest rates that are fluctuating, you've got markets that are fluctuating. Adaptive leadership is a great leadership style.
You, I totally agree. I think you can both add to this, but could that mean for a real estate investor today? One thing that we've been doing is auditing our business and
Mhm.
how we've been operating. And so you mentioned technology. That's certainly something that we've incorporated, whether it's a construction management for draw schedules or our proprietary software for how to service loans or our evaluation tools that we're using.
Yeah.
We've leaned into
Process.
to both process and policy we mentioned previously, and then technology.
Yeah.
What are some other things that people can do, or real estate investors specifically? If how do you audit? How does that process typically look? Because you've really helped us with that as well.
Yeah, so I think it begins with again that conceptual framework, and then bring it back to okay, what are the 2, 5, 7, 10 key aspects of the way that I'm running my business? And then in many respects, what I have found over time is that many leaders and businesses will want to talk about how we do it as opposed to what we do.
Mhm.
And in fact, it's the what we do that actually empowers us to actually do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes we can get stuck into the implementation of what we do as opposed to what are the key things that move the needle relating to this aspect of our business.
Right.
I'm a big proponent, and I know we are as well, in terms of, okay, here's our policy on pick a policy. And then what are the 10 things, 12 things, 15 things? And oh, by the way, if you can't say it on one line, you're saying too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And then it's not very empowering for people. And all of a sudden I feel like I'm, you know, um, kind of being driven by the particular policy as opposed to using it as a resource to help me better serve my customers.
I love that.
Yeah, and I would add on top of that is honing into your team, right? Because I think a lot of times when times get hard and it's uncertainty, people say, "Oh, I got to diversify. I got to do a bunch of different things." I think one, identifying your identity and what you do best,
Yeah.
saying, this is what my gifting is. This is what I do at the highest level. I think leaning into that with your processes and technology is absolutely imperative. And I think locking in on your relationships and your team. I think we've been really big with that is educating our team and making them the most proficient and strengthening them as much as possible to handle challenges and giving them the tools for solutions and understanding you can weigh on these relationships, even third party relationships,
Yeah.
our referral sources, even our inspectors, whatever it might be, but leaning into these relationships, understanding who you can count on, making sure that they're as sharp as you are in your craft. So I think relationships have been very huge for us in understanding who we
I think
count
what
on.
comes out in challenging markets as well is, am I being valuable?
Hmm.
Individually, am I adding value? And so I
Yeah.
love the idea of leaning into our team, and it's an opportunity for all of us to raise our game.
Yeah, I was to
Right.
say even us,
Yeah.
we've been, grow. We say always it's
Growth.
grow or die, right? But it's always growth, and tough markets are a great opportunity to really, like I said, audit, but then continue to grow.
Nobody loves setbacks, whatever those setbacks may look like. It could be our health, it could be our business, it could be whatever it may be,
Yeah.
loved ones. And so it's very energizing,
Yeah.
right? When we have, change is actually, how do we, oh my gosh, there's so much change going on. I don't know what to do. Another way of looking at it is, oh my gosh, there's so many opportunities as a result of the change. It all begins with that mindset.
Yeah, it's a good bridge question to like how do you stay focused? When there's, you mentioned,
Yeah.
try to do more. We're talking about kind of honing into what we can do, what are the controllables, as you said.
Yeah.
How can faith play a part in that as well, and how can we stay focused? How can investors stay focused on what matters?
Yeah, I think when we're clear about who we are, in my coaching practice, I'll ask people, well, without I'm not being as much of a jerk as it may sound when I say what I'm about to say, but it's like
Great preface.
that's right. But it's kind of like, did you think you created the world? And most of us say, well, no, not really. And well, who did? Well, I'm not sure. It might be God. It might be, I'm not sure. It just happened. I said, okay, well, let's just say it just happened. And so how far do you take that back? Well, I can take it back to the Big Bang. Okay, well, what happened with the Big Bang? Who or what created that? Well, I'm not real sure.
Right.
So there's something about faith, and I've had discussions with a number of people. There's kind of a number of pillars to what I believe is a purposeful life around faith, family, fitness, finance, and friendships, right? And so if you have balance in those areas, and for me, faith is right at the center of what we do
Mhm.
because it's a pillar,
Yeah,
right? It's a foundation.
sure.
So we're talking about real estate. We're talking about a foundation, something you can build upon, and
Mhm.
you can build upon that faith, and then all of the challenges that go in the world, you put them in proper perspective, right?
Right.
So you can lean on a belief system, which is, beyond and greater than whatever it is we may be experiencing on a day to day, week to week, month to month basis.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And a
Mm.
lot of the
Love that.
times, I know David and I have discussed this. You just spoke about balance of all these pillars. And people ask me, Caleb, how are you balanced? And I always say I'm imperfectly balanced because my balance might be different than others.
That's right.
Maybe I'm leaning on friendships a little bit more, or maybe I'm leaning on someone might be on fitness a little bit more. But in the end, your individuality is determines how much you're going to lean on each pillar, and that's what I tell people. There's no it's not a certain percentage of each one that creates the balance. It's what you think is best for yourself and creates that identity for yourself.
As you both know, I wrote a book several years ago called The Adam Connection. It's a story that connects Adam with Queen Elizabeth over 6,000 years and 144 generations, which is like, I had a full head of hair when I started writing that book, right? I mean, it was a lot of research, right? But what happens is when you think about that and the history of at least, documented word that can allow us to connect generations going back that far, you realize that we're here off the back of over 100 generations that came before us and they evolved.
Right.
I mean, we think it's like really difficult in today's what was it like during World War II? What was it like in World War One?
Yeah.
What must it have been like during the Civil War? What the heck that was going on during the Revolutionary War? And that's not even 250 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
So for me, it's like it's never as bad as we think it is and never as good as we want it to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that keeping things in proper perspective, we're people, we're allowed to have our people reactions and responses to things.
Yeah.
But I think that faith foundation kind of gives you that pillar to kind of navigate the turbulence of the predictable day-to-day world that goes on around us.
Yeah, that's great. And being timely as it's middle of December right now, and we're getting ready to revisit our OKRs or our objective key results, our KPIs, key
Mhm.
performance indicator, whatever you want to call them. I know
Yeah.
everybody has different terms. Our goal setting strategies, right,
Right.
for 2025. How I know for me personally, you and I have worked about this. We have our goal setting strategies for the businesses, but then even personally, I like to map goals around the 5 F's that you just mentioned: faith, family, fitness, friendships, finance.
Yeah.
And so I like to have 3 to 4 goals per bucket per
Yeah.
se.
Mm.
How would you advise real estate investors to strategize for 2025 and how to balance what's important within those? Let's call it those 5 F's for now.
Yeah, I would say first thing,
Obviously, faith you mentioned is at
yeah,
the top. But
Joe. We both know my oldest son, Joe, and Joe at one time had said something along the lines of, he said, I remember discussing that with my dad years ago, and strategy as much as what you don't do as what you do. So I'd say the first thing to do is be clear about what you do, and also be clear about what you don't do.
yeah,
And for me, it all begins with whether we call it a purpose or mission. If you have clarity around your purpose, your vocation, and I think vocation is a different word than work, as you know.
yeah,
And so something that has more meaning, right? Then I can set my priorities really easily around those things that move the needle.
yeah,
Mhm.
And so you mentioned OKRs. I was listening to. I kind of love them and I don't love them. Tom Billevue, it's like, I'm sure there's other words in his vocabulary than the F bomb.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, he was
Feedback theory, right?
yeah. So, but he's great, and he was, he may or may not hear this podcast, and I may or may not be on his show, but but anyway, he was talking about being good enough, and he was doing a talk, and he was basically describing OKRs,
Yeah,
and he said, you know what? He said, I'm basically talking to my team about, hey, did you meet your metrics?
Yeah.
So once you start with your mission, your
Yeah.
purpose, and then boil it down to those 10, no more than 15 kind of, here are the specific outcomes that I want to create. by date, put a date on it.
Yep.
Okay. And then, okay, am I meeting those? And if I'm meeting those, great. You're moving forward. You're a high performance person. And if you're not meeting them in that instance, in that space of time, we're just not good enough. And that's a hard lesson for each of us along the way. But then over time, somewhere along the way, it becomes very empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan Martell talks about, I'm in that coaching course as
Yeah.
well, that he talks about that you're not good enough as a reframe. And it can sound aggressive even at times, but I personally love it because, when we've been talking about buying back time and growth and scale. And, sometimes when you feel like things are hard and you're like, oh, to do, pick a measurement, but if it's this much volume, this number of transactions, well, I like to reframe and think, there's guys that are doing more than that, or there's groups that are doing more than that. Almost 10. I mean, you look at it like a Lima One Capital, they have 14,000 transactions. And, if we did 300, we're feeling like it's hard. It was just, you're not good enough. You're just not good enough yet.
Right.
And then what that means is like you just don't have the skill sets yet. Develop the skill sets and just kind of reframing that, because that pushes me back to growth. Well, I'm just
Right.
not good enough. I got to grow more. I have to educate myself more. There's better processes and systems that I can use. And what do I just not know yet? There's something out there that I don't know.
My wife Jill is even saying something. Oh, you're either learning or you're growing. It's
Right.
not like you're failing. It's like you're learning or you're growing. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. When we have setbacks, that's a growth opportunity. And it's interesting because if we filter, you're exactly right. If we filter those words at an emotional level,
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard.
Yeah. It's devastating.
But is it really that hard to hear those words? Oh, well, thank you.
Yep.
What can I do to get better? And I often use the words, sometimes we can provide each other inelegant feedback. Like I may say something real direct.
Yeah.
I might have been able, now maybe it was purposefully being direct.
Mhm.
And there are other times maybe I could, be a little bit more, framework, if you will. But either way, it's like, no, we've got to get better. I go back to the 6,000 years, 144 generations. Unless our ancestors weren't growing,
Right.
we literally wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So that's a sobering thought in many respects. Yes, and I'm inspired by that.
Yeah. Well, you spoke about evolution before, right? Does
Yeah.
evolution ever stop? And the truth is no. So will growth ever stop? No, it won't.
Yeah.
And that's why team is so important to us as an organization, because you just spoke about emotion and it's like, yeah, things can look dismal at moments and you could feel defeated at moments, but us as team members always to uplift each other and go back to our OKRs and our strategies as our foundation to say, hey, look, we're not that far off and let's get back inside of there so we can continue to grow.
That's
And
right.
I think it's so important to have those team members around you, because I know David and I and all of us together are constantly lifting each other up, but then at the same time, giving each other direct feedback that might sting a bit.
Accountability.
Yeah, you give each other that accountability where it's like,
When it comes
okay,
from a position of love too, when that's where what you said, Matt.
yeah, no, that's exactly what you're right, is love,
Well, and picking up on that, so in that type of a high performance environment,
Yeah.
right, we want to have trust.
Mhm.
And so we can be direct with each other because I think I just heard you say, because it's coming from a place of love.
Right.
Right. And so we have we strive to have that trusting environment. I'm not saying something mean spirited in order to be a jerk about it. I'm saying something direct in order to lift all of us up. Right. And
Right.
that's kind of like two different things. Now,
Right.
if I'm hearing it in one space, well, that's kind of on me,
Yeah.
not on the person that's giving me the direct feedback. So,
Yeah.
no, what happens is, I mean, if you look at the, elite teams,
Mhm.
right? There isn't an elite team in the world that wins because of only one player.
Right.
It just doesn't happen, only because of two players. Now, there may be 3 or 4 all-stars on a particular team.
Right.
We're kind of bound by our love for soccer in many respects. And
Yeah.
even the greatest soccer players in the world, they're not going to win championships unless they've got a great, because they're so good, many of the best in the world, such a great supporting cast
Absolutely.
who are equally great in the role that they play. So what role do we play? Where am I in my growth and development? What can I contribute right now, which won't be a thimbleful of what I'll contribute 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I love that.
Absolutely. I can't think of a better transition here into high performance teams and the growth mentality than the Catalyst Network that's coming out here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, Rob's been working on something for quite some time now. I think it's maybe a part of your dissertation. I'm not sure if that's true, but why don't you give us a little bit of insights on what is Catalyst?
Yeah. So it all began, believe it or not, maybe 25 or 30 years ago. And remember that I mentioned about those 4 million miles of air travel?
Yeah.
I used to think and think big when I would look outside of the window of the aircraft at 40,000 feet. And I used to always think about, because back in those days, when I was building a global business, I had no products, I had no customers, I had no team, and it was me. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so you had to go do all of those things. So I would think about, okay, how do you create what I call that combustion? How do you create that combustion? So it's just like, oh my gosh, it just kind of, ignites and goes. And really, that was the beginning of the notion of catalyst. And then within the past year, actually, just after we, released the book, came up with this idea of, a network or a community of high performing people, teams and leaders who want to elevate their performance. They want to break barriers. They want to drive growth. They want to create extraordinary results. And so we are within a month now of launching Catalyst Network, maybe a little bit over a month at the end of January. As our full launch, we're going to do a pre-launch and a soft launch, and
Yep.
that's beginning here shortly. But no, we're going to bring together a community of what we are intending to be: thousands and tens of thousands of leaders and teams, around the world that want to come together, learn from each other, share experiences, have access to world-class content that can be easily digested, can be shared. And we've all talked about this notion of democratizing some of the content,
Yeah.
making it widely available at a price. I mean, we've talked about it. It's a very affordable price where someone can come in and just be a part of a high performance network of people that just want to. We're going to do monthly group coaching. We're going to have monthly masterclass speakers. We're going to have events. We're going to have lots of engagement during the course of the week. So the big
Exciting.
paradigm shift for me as we were architecting this and working with the technology platform out in Silicon Valley for a portal was this notion of community. And I immediately think of both, all of us, but in particular, Caleb, and this notion of team. And it's like, we all are better together.
Yeah.
And that's kind of counterintuitive for high performers. It's like we want to be the ones out there. The truth is we're better together. Like we learn something from everybody. It might be a comment. It might be a little bit of a feedback, or, oh, I'm looking at it this way. Right. And so anyway, the Catalyst Network, we've been working on it for a number of months, and I've got a great team that I'm working with, and a number of people who want to come in and help us grow the network. You both are going to be ambassadors for the Catalyst Network. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And we've got a high performance group that want to help a lot of people, and so that's the origin and
That's
where
great.
we are.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So I mean, you said end of January. How can people find this Catalyst Network, and how can they join?
Yeah. So
there's going to be some excited folks out there.
well, we're going to do a pre-launch here within the next week or two.
Right.
And I've got specific dates, but let's just say a week or two.
Yep.
And then we've got a mobile app. So we're going to make it really easy for anyone to kind of join in and have access to all of the people and everyone in the community and all of the content. Then we're going to do a soft launch where we're going to bring a number of people into the community, just people that we know.
Right.
And then we're going to do a proper launch at the end of January. But we've got a URL. It's called My Catalyst Network. It's not pointing anywhere just yet, but here it's actually one of the action items I've got to do in the next day or two. But anyway, so we're going to point the domain to to the portal that we're building.
Yep.
And then when we release it and make it public, people will learn through word of mouth. Our ambassadors will reach out to people that they know. I actually think this thing is going to grow substantially organically.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we're all going to want people that we know. Hey, I'm part of this group called Catalyst Network. I think you ought to come in and be a part of this group.
Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, we've been in several groups like nothing like this, but I mean, we've been in around high performance people.
Yeah.
And there's something about, I mean, even every Friday, me and Caleb have been meeting every Friday from like 6:30 to 9 for like 5-6 years now, and there's nothing like walking out of that room on a Friday morning and feeling fired up, energized, refocused, and ready to attack the day. And so I think just from that standpoint, I'm really excited because I know that whether it's real estate investors out there, our borrowers, or any other high performance individuals or people looking to grow, there's nothing like being around other growth-minded individuals that will fire you up and keep you focused.
Like-minded leaders and teams and organizations. And one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to have daily Catalyst messages.
Yeah.
bite-sizable. I'm sure they'll be inspiring, but they'll be action-oriented. Hey, take this concept, let's call it growth. Take this concept of growth mindset, and here's how you can apply it in your work today.
Yeah.
So you get these reminders, okay, every day. Right now, I mean, I get up so early, I'd like to have them available at 3 o'clock in the morning. But the more sane people on my team are saying, hey, 6 o'clock's okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's going to come out to 6 in the morning. We'll get a daily catalyst message for everyone on the team. And then we'll have events, we'll have, polls, we'll have surveys, we'll have lots of things that we can do to engage.
Some of the
inside
modules
network.
too. I mean, there's a lot of because we've been a part of some of the modules in training for our team specifically, but some of these modules are phenomenal where you can not only can you learn and grow, but you can take them to your team,
Yeah.
and they're actionable items. They're good. Great work sessions as well that you can have, growth conversations with your team. And I think most of these leaders will probably want to incorporate their team into the group at some point, and probably sooner than later once they join. But these modules as well can be so empowering.
Are you saying we were kind of like guinea pigs, DKC? Is that what you're trying to insinuate?
Well, first amongst equals, that's for sure. And so, no, I think you're exactly right, David. And look, if we want teams to continue to elevate their performance, we want to continue to challenge ourselves. We want to provide resources that can do that. And if we can do that as cost-effective resources, and it's kind of like, okay, what does high performance mean? Well, it means
Right.
performing better than I did yesterday.
Right.
And then what am I going to be better at the end of the year? Is this going to be my best year ever? Right. And then why is it going to be my best year ever? Because I spent $5,000 to go to a conference. And I'm going to forget 70% of what
Right.
and I actually don't implement much of anything when I come
Right.
back to my office. Like what? That
Absolutely.
makes no sense at all. So now we've got
Stacking the days.
continuity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that. I think it's going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very empowering. Oh, and then I know you both know this. It's all built around what we call the 7 dimensions of high performance. The
Okay.
7 dimensions of high performance. So it all begins with, perhaps not surprisingly, empowerment.
Right.
And then we go to mindset, and then we go to leadership, and then productivity, and then performance, and then resilience, and then influence. So we've got 7 dimensions of high performance. And so month in and month out, we'll have monthly themes. And then, our coaching will relate to those themes. We'll have members inside the community will come in and participate in my monthly coaching that I'll be leading.
Mhm.
And because we've got a lot of talent already signed
yeah.
up to be a part of the
Yeah.
team. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Would you say there's any prerequisites to anyone, or is this going to be open to everyone?
If I'd say the prerequisite is if you want to grow, if you want to be better, if you are in leadership at all levels, it might be someone who's at the beginning of their journey. It might be an executive that just wants to hone their craft. The example I always like to,
Yeah.
if we're only off by 2% and we're trying to go to the moon, we just overshot it by 10,000 miles.
Hmm.
Right. So is there one thing I can learn? Is there, and no one's looking for advice necessarily, although I'm sure that people will share experiences, and here are some
Yeah. I was gonna say
challenges
the
are
shared
facing.
stories are always really
Yeah. And I think
impactful.
that's how we learn, right? It's what they call experiential learning. And
Yeah.
so, so I think that leaders at all levels, we'll have organizations that will want to bring in teams. I've got some organizations I'll speak to already that are talking about bringing in 50, 100, 150 people into the Catalyst network.
Oh.
And so, this particular organization is very entrepreneurial by nature.
Yep.
Mhm.
So anybody who wants to grow, get better, serve their customers more fully, grow individually. And as we all know,
Mhm.
when we're growing in our leadership, it kind of has effect on our non-work life.
Oh yeah.
So all of our spouses and girlfriends and
They're
boyfriends,
gonna know it.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not for that purpose, but it's what happens, right? Because we're growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Well, this has been a great podcast today. I
Yeah.
mean, to summarize a couple of the key points today on pivoting in a tough market, we talked a lot about adaptability. We talked about honing in on your craft, leveraging technologies. There's any other final remarks or statements you guys want to make today?
No, don't be afraid to try. Don't give up, because that's what most people do. The tough market comes, and then people hang it up. Don't hang it up.
And I would say get in the game. Whatever game you're in, get in the game, and don't worry about what you have and what you don't have. When you're in the game, you're going to get better. And it's like, and typically what happens in difficult markets is that we want to do more things above the funnel. Yeah, I might want better results, but maybe I have to do more above the funnel, if you will, in order to
Sure.
kind of get those similar or better results.
It's really
But
good.
get in the game.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This was another great episode, and I'm
Yeah.
sure there will be a number 3 in our future. So 2025.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks for joining another episode of How to Make Money with Hard Money. Please like, subscribe, and follow on all social media platforms. You can catch this podcast on Apple Podcast and YouTube.